And hello, Savannah. Thank you for tuning into WRUULP Savannah, Georgia, 107.5 FM, WRUU.org. We are Savannah Soundings, community radio with global soul. Thank you for tuning in. My name's Julia M. Spencer, and my show right here is called Real Estate Real Talk. And what we talk on my show about is anything and everything related to real estate investing, landlord things, tenant stuff, and vacation rentals, and anything and everything in between. So we answer questions, we play music, and we kind of just try to give you some information as it relates right here to the Savannah, Georgia area, and also the show is later on published on my YouTube channel as well as the WRUU.org website. So we have all kinds of topics that we discuss. And on today's show, we are going to be talking about the licensing of short-term vacation rentals in unincorporated Savannah, and that is Chatham County. So we're not talking about the city specifically, but the areas of Chatham County that are outside city limits. We have a new ordinance right here in this area, and it is a Chatham County ordinance, and we're going to talk a little bit about this ordinance, its details, kind of give you the cliff notes about it, when it's in effect, what you need to know, and kind of like my experience with it, because I actually had to apply for a couple of those licenses myself because I have a couple of Airbnbs outside the city. And we're going to also talk a little bit about what happens if you don't get that license. So I know some of you guys that are listening have Airbnbs outside the city limits. And as of late, we didn't have to get any licenses. There wasn't an ordinance, any kind of process for it. But that has changed as of July 1st. And so we're going to be talking about that on this show. So please stay on. Continue listening. I'll give you all the details that you need to know. And until then, we're going to play a little bit of music in between, and I'll be right back after that. So stay on. Don't go anywhere. And that was Clown featuring Trevor Daniel by Black Bear, I believe. Yeah, I looked that up even. This brand new song just came out a couple days ago, so I haven't had it on my playlist very long. I hope you like that. Got a couple new tracks too here for you as well here throughout this hour, but we have a lot to cover, especially if you're not aware of this new ordinance actually that we have here in Savannah, Georgia. And this is something interesting for the people right here locally in Savannah, but also if you are an Airbnb host or a short-term vacation rental host anywhere else in the state, you may want to investigate your area, your county, and your city as well for the same kinds of rules to see what there is in terms of local laws, because it can be quite costly if you don't have the license. And for the people, at least here locally in Savannah, I've given you a little bit of, I'm going to give you a little bit of information because I actually took some time yesterday and the day before to study the ordinance and kind of give you a little bit of a summary of it. But what we're talking today is about having to get a license from Chatham County to operate short-term vacation rentals in the unincorporated areas of Chatham County. So not within the city limits because they have their own process, but in the unincorporated areas of Chatham County. So we're going to talk about that today. I hope I can cover it all because I got a lot to cover here. We're going to basically talk about, first off, what it is and when this ordinance came about, because this is a new thing. I don't know, some of you people have maybe done Airbnb rentals. So here in the unincorporated areas of Chatham County, we have something close to 500 short-term vacation rentals, and that is 500 houses, probably many more listings if people are renting out individual rooms. But we're talking about units, and units basically means individual houses. And so Chatham County, I guess, has been kicking around the idea for a long time now to kind of figure out a way on how to capitalize this and kind of a little bit how to regulate that. And being that there's so many and there's more coming because we're a tourist area here, it's a pretty interesting thing that they finally pushed this through. We're kind of waiting for this. I mean, I personally have been waiting for this for a long time. My rentals here in Chatham County in the unincorporated areas here in Whitmarsh Island I've operated for close to 8 years now. And every once in a while, I get complaints because I get unruly guests and have to take care of that, and neighbors complaining, and neighbors always threatening me. We're going to shut you down. You're not allowed to do this here. And I'm like, well, there's no regulation that I can't. So I'm going to do it until I can't anymore. Well, now has come the point where I can't unless I have a license. So my friend Daniil, who's here from Atlanta, is actually sitting in the studio, and he does not want to speak. But he and I, we went and basically did the government roundabout yesterday to go to the different offices and try to get these licenses. And I'm going to tell you a little bit our experience of how that worked out. But if you have a short-term vacation rental, basically, in summary, in unincorporated Chatham County, you have to apply for a license now. This is in effect as of July 1st, as I mentioned. This particular ordinance was actually passed right before the big hit of COVID. I was actually hoping that it was kind of delayed because of COVID, but apparently it was passed on March the 6th. But on July 1st, this ordinance came into effect. And according to Commissioner Dean Kicklighter of District 7 in Chatham County, he basically said that was done to kind of regulate that because we didn't have any regulations before, but still allow homeowners to make money, but ensure that property rights of neighbors are also observed. And that's kind of like how that came about. But let's talk a little bit about the ordinance details, because the ordinance itself is actually available in the Chatham County Code Book. If you wanted to read the whole thing, it's really easy to find online. You type in Chatham County Code Book online, and it's on chathamcountyga.gov. And it's the ordinance is Chapter 16. It's business regulations and licensing. And for your benefit here on the radio, since you have been loyal listeners here on my show, I'm going to give you a little bit of Cliff Notes, what it actually says and what you need to kind of just remember. And we're talking about Article 8, which is the short-term rental ordinance. There are in total 11 sections. And what do those sections actually say? So in summary, we're going to talk about those. Yeah. So in summary, we're going to talk about them. First off, short-term vacation rentals, what even are they? And that's for any rental that is below 30 days, according to the ordinance, which is kind of weird because state law actually says that it's 31 days or over is considered a long-term rental, and below, I guess, is short-term rental, but there's nothing there about 31 days. It says below 30 days, below 30 consecutive days is considered a short-term rental. And they do want to regulate those specific rentals. The ordinance also states that they only allow 2 adults per bedroom and 2 extra for the whole dwelling. So if you have a 3-bedroom home, that'll be 6 people plus 2. So you have an 8 people occupancy rating for that particular building. So of course you can host more people if you have more bedrooms, but you can't stuff 10 people into a room, which I totally agree with anyways. A house, according to the ordinance, is considered the unit. So even if you rent out individual rooms, it's just one unit. One house is one unit. And you are obligated under this ordinance to obtain this license and post it inside as well as the parking rules and this occupancy rate that's going to be given to you. You have to also post notices about noise restrictions and emergency point of contact in your rental. And this particular license is non-transferable. So that means if you sell your house if you sell your house, basically, the new owner has to pay for this license again. And it's 1 license per property. And some of you guys asked me, how much is it? It's $350 for the initial application and $250 for all subsequent renewals, that is. But there's a couple more things that you may need to know about this ordinance. And I have my little sticky notes here, so we're going to talk about those. I'm going to talk as much as I can here to fill up our hour and play some music in between to catch my breath. But here are a couple more points that you might need to take away and that might be of interest to you. The only people that can apply for the license are owners of the property. So if you are a tenant and you have been subletting rooms, you can't do that anymore, at least not legally. So I have actually had a house, and I remember it was on 41st Street, that I sold to some investors that I purchased at a tax sale. And they actually were remodeling it and renting it to other people. And those people were then subletting on the Airbnb to make their own rent payments, basically. Can't do that anymore. The only people that can apply for a license are the owners of the property. Now, what you work out with your tenants is kind of like hard to track, I guess. I mean, if you as a tenant want to operate an Airbnb on your property and basically sublet under your lease, the owner of your property still has to get the license. So that's kind of how it works. And they're also responsible to comply with all the laws. The police will actually review your application according to this ordinance. Is there any illegal activity going on? Has there been any illegal activity at this address for the last 2 years? So you're going to get like a police check. And as I mentioned, there's a $250 renewal fee. You have to affirm that you comply with land usage restrictions to include covenants, deed restrictions, HOA rules, and regulations. So even though in the application, we're going to talk a little bit about what you actually have to fill out because we had to do this yesterday. In the application, it says, okay, you're just stating and verifying that you're complying with all of this, but there isn't really any proof that they asked us for other than, yeah, I agree to this and I comply with this and here's the notary stamp kind of thing. And Chatham County actually has the right to audit you. So, and from what I read, they actually have the right to even look at your records, including your financial records for your rental listings. So when you're applying for this license, you basically kind of like you're opening your QuickBooks to the county and they can look at it anytime. The county manager can, believe it or not. I was reading that. It's like, how many people were at this meeting? Did anybody raise any issues with this? Because I wasn't at these meetings when this was decided. So I would have maybe said, okay, my financial records are kind of my business. But anyways, that's besides the point. We're going to talk about that here in a bit. Like I said, this is why I read the disclaimer. I have a lot of opinions on the show. But I just wanted to share that with you because I think a lot of people need this information and we all kind of have been stabbing in the dark. I know of at least 2 other Airbnb hosts on Whitmarsh Island I had to convey this information to, and they absolutely had no clue. One of which has been doing it a couple of years longer than I. Another one was kind of a recent addition to the Airbnb host pool. But either one of them had no clue whatsoever about this ordinance, that it's new, that it's in effect already, and that you actually can get punished already if you don't comply with it. So listen up, people. This is important stuff today. Let's talk a little bit more about this ordinance because there's more. It's actually, in total, it's 8 pages. It's pretty easy read, but when I was reading it yesterday, it appeared to me that they kind of have the idea of what they want this ordinance to be, but haven't really thought through all the details of how to do it. And when we actually did apply for the licenses yesterday, the county officials even didn't really know and had to pull up the ordinance themselves to read it up because they had a question about something. But we'll talk about that here in a minute. I'll share that story. Let's talk a little bit about grounds for suspension. That's another thing that I made a note of when I was reading this ordinance yesterday. So grounds for suspension of your license to operate a short-term vacation rental in unincorporated Chatham County is if there's an issue with public safety. And that would be, for example, if there's some drug use or drug activity on your property. Another ground for suspension is public health, welfare, or interest is not guaranteed. So if the place becomes uninhabitable, basically, because, it's fallen down or, you have like a roof leak that's like a big gash. Another reason for grounds for suspension is upon repeated public complaints. And I was kind of perking my little ears up because of that, because I've had people complaining. I had neighbors complaining. One of my houses on Whitmarsh Island is very close to my neighbors within a couple of feet. They were just built that way. So whenever we operate an Airbnb and my guests maybe play music a little bit too loud, you can actually hear it. Not going to mention that my neighbor right next door also has a rooster. I did mention it. So my brain is laughing. But, I'm kind of a peaceful person. I don't make any stress for anybody if people leave me alone. But anyway, so upon repeated public complaints, 3+ for violations of Chatham County Code, state law, or this ordinance, if it endangers peace and welfare of the community, the county manager may suspend your license for that as well. Now, however, for all of these grounds of suspension, the county manager can only suspend the license for at the most 30 days without a hearing. So you will have an avenue to actually go out and kind of appeal the suspension. So there's a process now in place to kind of like give you a little bit more rights as the host as well. If you just have some neighbors that just don't like you, and, I've had those as well. I don't have any right now, thank goodness. Well, no, I have one. I still have one, but but I tried to be nice to everybody, and hopefully they're nice to me. That's all I can do. Actually, you know what? We're almost at the bottom of the hour. We have a couple more minutes. So let's talk a little bit in our next segment. That's kind of like the summary of it, actually. So we haven't talked yet about punishment of violations of this ordinance, but I wanted to get to that last. Let's talk in the next segment about our experience yesterday of trying to get these licenses and who we had to go talk to and what we had to provide. I wanted to share that with you. But we're going to do that after a break song because I've been talking for a long time and I need to take a little bit of a breather. So I'm going to play a little bit of a break song here and I'll be right back after this. So stay on, don't go anywhere. You are listening to Real Estate Real Talk with Julia M. Spencer, and we're talking about this new ordinance in unincorporated Chatham County to regulate short-term vacation rentals. So this is for you hosts out there. So stay on, don't go anywhere.
Many critical issues are facing the residents of Savannah and all Americans, including the coronavirus, homeschooling, and the upcoming general election. WRUU has 3 programs which address these issues: The Common Good on Fridays from 2 to 3 p.m., The Happy Homeschooler on Wednesdays from 2 to 3 p.m., and We the People, The Constitution Today on Sundays from 8 to 9 p.m. Stay informed about these important issues by tuning into these programs on WRUU.
WRUU 107.5 FM is a new and different listener-supported and all-volunteer community radio station for Savannah. Our diverse broadcast and web programming is supported by generous listeners who value our passion and our spunk. We're independent of other media and receive no government or large corporate support. People like you are the largest and most important source of our funding. So go to WRUU.org to find out how you can make a one-time or monthly contribution. Thank you.
If you have lost your job or have had hours reduced or otherwise need assistance with rent, mortgage, or utility payments due to the COVID-19 virus, you may qualify for assistance through the City of Savannah's share of the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security CARES Act grant. This message is brought to you by the City of Savannah and the United Way of the Coastal Empire. For more information and to see if your family qualifies, call 211.
And thank you for staying here with me with Real Estate Real Talk with Julia M. Spencer. I hope you enjoyed that song. That was one of the ones I picked up there in Mexico. Love that one. It's called A Tu Merced by Bad Bunny. And on today's show, we're talking about short-term vacation rentals, specifically the fact that you now have to get a license in unincorporated Chatham County, which previously there was no such ordinance and you didn't have to get a license, but you do now as of July 1st. And kind of what the ordinance actually says. I kind of went over that in this first half of the show. By the way, if you missed it, it will be published in the next day or two on the WRUU.org website as well as my YouTube channel. It's really easy to find me. It's free to watch for public information. My name, Julia M. Spencer. You can look it up. And we're basically talking in this next segment, first off, what you actually need to bring to the table there in order to get this license, and also our experience with it yesterday, since we were just there to apply for 3 of my properties that are located on Whitmarsh Island, which still has a Savannah address, but it's actually unincorporated Savannah, so it's not within the city limits. So let's talk first a little bit about what we had to bring, because it took me a little while to get this paperwork ready. They actually have a website, and it is on the Savannah Chatham County Building Safety, I believe, website. And if you need that information, I'm going to post it once I post this show on our website as well as my YouTube channel. I'm going to put the link there. But what you'll need to bring is actually a bunch of stuff. So get ready for some paperwork there if you haven't done this before. You need the short-term vacation rental application, which is provided on the website there for you to fill out. There's a regulation form that's basically just a form that says that you're going to comply with all those regulations. I just mentioned the HOA, any kind of state laws, or any covenants for your community, stuff like that, and that you're basically certifying that you're going to comply with those. It has to be notarized. There is also a completed a life safety compliance verification form. It has to be completed. That basically just says that, okay, I have a fire extinguisher and I have, smoke detectors and all that stuff that kind of has to do with fire safety and building safety. And of course, as we understood it anyways, we're going to be inspected for this. So you kind of have to read the form and see what it says, even though we don't have an appointment scheduled. So I don't know about that, but we'll talk about that here in a second. You do need to bring your copies of your driver's licenses. Could also be a state ID or passports. And that's for all applicants. So I actually applied with my name, but I also have my property manager who is also on these forms, and he had to provide the information as well, a copy of his driver's license. You do also need a notarized affidavit verifying the status for county public benefit application. That's a handful, and they actually didn't even provide that form to you. So I looked it up because it's some sort of Georgia state law that if you're basically employed, even if you're self-employed and you're employing just yourself, or if you're employing other people, you kind of have to fill that out. It has to be notarized. And the other thing is, of course, the private employer affidavit. So that means if you have certain kind of amount of employees, you have to kind of write down how many. And of course, in my case, that didn't apply because it's just me and my friend here, and you have to provide proof of ownership. Renters of real property are not eligible. So what I brought to them, actually, I went to the tax commissioner's website and just printed my tax bill, my most recent tax bill, because that's one thing they want as well, to verify that you actually paid your property taxes. So I printed that out, so it said basically current owner, had my name, and then the fact that I just paid the first installment of the yearly taxes here in Chatham County. Were billed twice for the year. So the first tax bill is due, I believe, on June the 15th, and then there's another one due in November. So the first one was already paid. It's paid by my mortgage company, so if you have a mortgage, that's actually going to be paid out of your escrow account, so you shouldn't have to worry about that yourself unless you own the property fair and square. Then it comes, of course, out of your pocket. But you have to provide that. Anyways, where was I? So I had to print out basically a proof of ownership of this property, of the properties that I own. And I printed that out from the tax commissioner's website. And it basically is just your recent tax payments form. And it has some information about the property, but also had my name and the fact that I paid the first installment of the property taxes. So I submitted that, and this is where we ran into our first problem yesterday with the ladies, because they were looking at this and they were saying, like, well, this doesn't prove to me that you own the property. And I'm like, what do you mean? It's from the tax commissioner's website. Chatham County Tax Commissioner's website says I own this property, and I printed this out. It had a date stamp of when I printed it out, and it even had the address, the web address where I pulled this information from. And the ladies there was like, well, I don't think we can accept that for proof of ownership. And our question was, so what do you need? Do you need a mortgage statement? Do you need the actual deed? What do you actually need? And the ladies there they were super helpful, actually, by the way. Shout out to that department. And in fact, that was Chatham County Building Safety and Regulatory Services. That's what it was. they were super helpful. Shout out to the ladies. We had 3 people working on our applications, and we were so grateful to them. But they didn't know what would constitute proof of ownership of a property. And they were kind of left in the dark as well, because we all pulled out the ordinance and started reading it to see what it actually says. And they couldn't find anything about what is sufficient for proof of ownership. And when I read the ordinance myself last night, I couldn't find anything either. So in the end, the printout from the tax commissioner's website was sufficient to prove that I'm the owner for all of those 3 properties that I applied for. So we could move forward on that at least. Another thing that was required was the proof of homeowners insurance or other structural insurance indicating that the property is actually a rental. So if you have your properties that you've been renting out on Airbnb, you had them rented out as an individual or private residence, then you're likely not insured under the rental umbrella. There's a special clause that you have to include in your insurance. I have that anyways because my properties have always been rentals and I don't live in any of them. So we had that, thank goodness. But we're getting into like big stacks of paper now, and things got a little bit messed up, so we couldn't find that paper right away. It was stuck with another paper's insurance, and there was 5 people working on these 3 applications in total. And thank goodness we came after lunch. It was 1:00 when our appointment was. It was a very smart move on my friend Danielle here to set the appointment up for 1:00. When not just ourselves, we just came from lunch and we had a full tummy and we're kind of happy and, peaceful. But I'm assuming that the ladies also that were helping us had lunch and had eaten and weren't cranky or anything like that. It's kind of hard to do a lot of paperwork when you're kind of hungry and aggravated. So all 5 of us were working on it, and we finally, figured out the order of the papers and where the papers needed to go. Another thing that they requested was the fact that you had to provide a copy of a most current ad valorem property tax receipt from Chatham County. So I believe that's the sales tax. I'm not sure exactly. But anyway, that's basically the hotel. And, oh no, this is a different one. So basically just the fact that you paid the tax, we had that. The other thing that you needed to provide was a proof of fire subscription service. So if you're living in unincorporated, or your properties rather, are in unincorporated Chatham County, the fire services are actually provided by subscription service, so you basically have to pay for those outside any other bills that you pay for your property, and so you have a subscription for each property that you own. So you provide the proof that you paid that, and you also had to provide proof that there is trash pickup service at your property. So all of these things make sense if you're a property owner and you take care of your property and you maintain your properties. You would have all this information already. It just took some time to actually gather all of the right pieces of information and receipts and put everything together in the right order. The very last thing, though, is kind of like where we ran into another problem. On the checklist for this short-term vacation rental application for unincorporated Chatham County, they ask for proof of payment of the hotel, motel, excise tax. And I kind of had a brain flash about this because first off, I'm like, what kind of tax is this? I've never had to pay this. And I did remember that Airbnb, and I don't know if you're using other portals, not just Airbnb, but maybe VRBO or some of the other ones. They actually sent me a letter in March, I believe, or February, basically saying that they are now required by the state of Georgia to collect this hotel, motel excise tax on all reservations. I'm not sure exactly how much the percentage is, and I've never seen it because actually what I've read that is, as a host, you don't actually pay this tax. This tax is paid by the guests, and it's added to the bottom of their bill, basically. But if you're familiar with how Airbnb works and maybe some of the other portals, you don't actually really see what the guest pays. This is why the portal exists, that there's some sort of anonymity factor between the hosts and the guests, that you don't exchange payment information and address information. All of that is maintained by Airbnb, basically. as a transaction entity, basically. And what they do is they basically add this hotel motel excise tax at the bottom of the guest's bill versus the bill of the host. And then what I read in the email, I kind of ignored this email because it didn't apply to me back in March, but I pulled it back up 2 days ago and I read it, and it basically says that Airbnb actually collects this tax from all reservations in one specific area and then submits a tax return, one tax return for all hosts in that area paying that tax, basically. And the only people that can actually get a copy of this tax return are authorized entities. And that's all it said in the email from Airbnb. And to me, that implied that there's personal information on there, probably on all the hosts. And so they don't just give this tax return just to anybody. Unless you make like a public information request. I'm not even sure you can get it that way. That's kind of like a legal area that I'm not really familiar with. But in any case, I couldn't figure it out. If you are an Airbnb host now, you can, however, go into your properties and your settings in your account. And I believe that there is a section there for payments or transaction history, I think it's called. And you can go under gross earnings and basically run a report for certain dates for your gross earnings, which will show you how much you were given, how much was paid for cleaning, how much was paid for extra charges, like if you had linen fees or management fees or whatever else that you added as the host. But it also shows what was added for the guest for this hotel motel excise tax. So when I looked it up, and they started collecting this fee on April 1st, when I looked it up, they're actually collecting quite a bit from the guests for this tax, and it's quite significant. So I was really happy to see that Airbnb takes this from the guests and pays that directly, and I, as a host, am not involved with this. So that is pretty much the checklist, and it was a good stack of paper, and we had that stack of paper times 3, of course, because we applied for this for 3 different properties. And again, reading the ordinance, of course, if you have maybe 30 listings, if you're renting out individual rooms as well as the houses in total, of course, you only have to get a license per unit, and a unit is basically considered a house, whether you have 10 listings for that house or just 1. So that's kind of like a little bit of the outline of what happened to us yesterday. I do have a little bit more information for you. We have about 15 minutes. I knew I was going to run over here. But let's talk about a couple more pointers on what the punishments might be in case you violate this ordinance and do not get a license and choose to operate your short-term vacation rental in unincorporated Chatham County without this license. We're going to talk about that after this break, so stay on, don't go anywhere. And thanks for tuning into Real Estate Real Talk with Julia M. Spencer. We're talking about this new ordinance where you have to get a license basically in unincorporated Chatham County to operate a short-term vacation rental. Has been in effect since July 1st, so I know there's a lot of you guys out there listening to the show that might be interested in this. I wanted to briefly just mention that there has been an ordinance like this for the city of Savannah for quite a long time, several years actually. So if you're operating your short-term vacation rental within the city limits, there's another department that's responsible for this, and you got to contact the city of Savannah, and they have different rules, kind of the same but actually different. So it's a different jurisdiction that's responsible for you. What I'm talking about is the unincorporated areas of Chatham County, so outside city limits. We haven't had an ordinance for this yet, but we do now. So if you're operating your short-term vacation rental, Airbnb or whatever outside city limits, this applies to you. And also another thing I wanted to mention that we didn't mention in the last segment is another thing that we did have to provide, and this was kind of interesting, is we actually had to provide the information about the parking regulations for each one of the properties I applied for. And we asked the ladies, what does that mean? And they're like, well, you have to give us some sort of diagram showing where the parking is. And I'm like, I don't have a diagram. He's like, well, you can just take a picture and show us where it is. I'm like, I don't have a picture either. So we had to get very quickly, SCAD students would have been really ashamed of us yesterday because we had to get some pieces of paper and just start drawing our houses. and the parking and basically market, and we just butchered it. It was good, but it was butchered. I mean, it was butchered. It was fun though. I mean, we had fun drawing, and they accepted our drawings without any corrections. So I'm proud of that. My ego is not hurt, is not affected by this. So it was interesting. But in the end, after doing this, 5 of us for it was probably close to an hour maybe. They did accept our application, so I don't know what the next step is. I will inform you listeners out there in future shows, so please continue listening to my show here on the air. I'm usually on Wednesdays at noon, and I'll give you a little bit more details of what happens next. As far as I understand is that a building safety inspector will come out to the properties to inspect that we have that fire extinguisher we're talking about, and the smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors, and the parking is as we say it is, and that we indicated the occupancy load correctly as we stated as well. So they're going to come out and kind of inspect us, I believe, and then finally give us the license. But as I understand, this is actually happening within the next couple days, so it's kind of like a follow-up call that we have to make. I just wanted to lay this out for you. And we have about 7 more minutes, so I have to hurry. So what kinds of punishments can you expect if you violate this ordinance and basically operate your short-term vacation rental without this license? Basically, if you do this, your first conviction is a 2 nights rental conducted in violation. That's going to be your fine. If it's a second conviction, it's going to be 5 nights. And third conviction, it's more than 5 nights, but less than $1,000. So the maximum fine that you can get for violating this ordinance is $1,000. But, of course, the county manager has the right to revoke your license as well. And then you might get shut down for 30 days, and then you have to go through the appeal process. Probably have to have some legal costs and things like that. So it's not like super intensive and super strict. I think they maybe want to change that in the future or so, because a lot of people just don't even know this ordinance exists yet. But still, you don't want to be out of money that you shouldn't have to be out of. There are additional fines for violations. For example, if you violate the parking situation that you indicated, basically it's $100. If you have a noise violation, it's $100, and if you have an occupancy load violation, it's $150. I think they're just trying to prevent people from renting a house and packing 500 people in there and 20 cars and basically have a big frat party in there or something, or sorority party. So basically, in summary, if the police is called, this will also be reported to the building safety office, and not sure what happens after that. It's all a little bit vague from this point onward, but at least, to kind of ease your mind, you don't have to freak out and run to this office. I mean, you should probably get your paperwork ready, but I wouldn't freak out, because the fines don't seem like they're just extraordinary. You don't have to go to jail or anything like that. So just wanted to be transparent here, let you guys know out there, if you're operating short-term vacation rentals, you kind of have to be aware of this. Now, if you're within city limits, though, like I said, City of Savannah city limits, this doesn't apply to you because they have their own ordinance, and the same applies for Tybee Island out there. They also have their own ordinances for how to operate short-term vacation rentals. That, my dear listeners, brings me to the end of my show today. And I hope this was informational for you. I'm going to try to put this show on the WRU.org website, hopefully this evening, and I will try to rerun this show as well, so you can hear this show again and get the information again. Also encourage you to do your own research online. Now, you were listening to Real Estate Real Talk with Julia M. Spencer. I do appreciate that you have tuned in. Try to tune in again. I sometimes have some really cool stuff that I'm sharing. It's my show is on Wednesdays at noon. You can also listen to past shows on my channel, my YouTube channel, Julia M. Spencer, and the WRU.org website, as I already mentioned. And we're going to play I think we're going to play one more song. I think the one that was requested, I can't find it. So sorry, Andy. Can't find it. But we will play it the next time. So please listen in again. And yeah, what else? Oh, right after this show, if you're interested in African music and music with African roots, you should stay on. We have some really cool stuff coming up. If that's not really your thing, check out our schedule on the wruu.org website. We have a genre and a topic for anybody. We have over 70 volunteer hosts at this station and all kinds of topics. So, and we're very different. We're all volunteer-ran radio station, and we're very local and very involved, and this is our passion. So please tune in often, and give us some good feedback, if you will. And we look forward to serve you in the future. So have a great Wednesday, everybody, and tune in again. Goodbye.
For your free guide to real estate investing, visit juliamspencer.com.